Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Facebook Live Q&A. My name is Shansi Omaniyi, and I'm the Online Content Director for Midwest Parent Educators, or MPE. And our guest tonight is Jean Wetherilt. Jean is MPE's Special Needs Coordinator, as well as an occupational therapist and founder of the PossAbilities Pediatric Therapy Clinic. You can read her full biography on her website, which is www.poss-abilities.com. Jean, welcome.
Thank you, Shansi. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is probably one of my favorite things is to talk to homeschooling moms, but it's a little weird to be the talker and not hear you back. So please be patient as we learn this process. As you know, or as many of you know, PossAbilities exists to partner with parents, and it's our joy to do that on a daily basis. We have occupational therapy and speech therapy, as well as physical therapy, just a little bit of physical therapy here at the clinic. We do individual therapy, and we also provide group therapy. And we're really excited this fall. We're launching several groups that are specially scheduled and hopefully affordable to homeschooling families. So we're going to do those on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And again, that information is on the website. But if you comment or have a question, we'll put your name in a drawing for 10% off our groups or a free book. This book that I wrote a few years ago, Walks on the Wild Side. It's about animal walks and how they contribute to therapy goals. So several people submitted questions, and we're going to try to go over as many of those as possible and hit about 3 or 4 other topics. First of all, I want to talk about the benefits of homeschooling children with special needs. And as I'm giving those benefits, if anybody wants to comment, again, we'll put your name in the drawing, on what you see as benefits for homeschooling, that would be awesome, because I know what I experienced as a homeschooling mom and what I saw as benefits, but I know I always have learned from other parents, and honestly, some of my best ideas have come from you all. So we know it allows homeschooling kids with special needs, allows an opportunity to build a foundation for academic learning. Some kids are not ready. Their bodies may not be ready. They have sensory needs. They may have motor needs that they're not ready for academic learning. So it allows for time for that and for development. It allows more opportunities for hands-on learning. As you know, in schools, I know many teachers try very hard in formal schools to teach to many different learning styles, but those kids that need the hands-on or the kinesthetic learning frequently don't get their needs met in a formal classroom. It allows times to develop independence and life skills, and I think that's an area, again, that a lot of times we overlook, and it's so important to take that opportunity, and I'll talk later about executive functioning and how working on life skills actually targets a lot of those executive functioning skills. Allows flexibility. Is any day the same, right? Allows for setting up of the nervous system. At PossAbilities, we use a couple different curriculums, as well as our knowledge about sensory systems. We use the ALERT program, and we use zones of regulation for discussing how we're all different and how we can use different sensory modalities and sensory activities to achieve the right state of arousal or alertness for learning. So that's another area. You can set up your environment in your home and in your classroom so that is the optimal place for your children to learn. More recess, right? We all need to have more recess. You can also design your school environment and make modifications for individual learning needs. I have this little, I don't know if you guys can see this, but see this little guy all slouched over? It says, what's behind that slouched posture? And it can be a lot of different things. It can be just that he's lacking interest. It could be fatigue, discomfort. There could be reflex integration, that they're retaining primitive reflexes. There could be visual difficulties or core postural stability. So again, at PossAbilities, we assess those needs, and we can give you ideas, but you can also look at it yourself. Is my student sitting like that all day, and what can I do about it? You can see this chair is not sized for him. So that's one thing you can do is modify your seating. I've noticed that some of the new classrooms that are out there, some of the formal classrooms, are filled with alternative seating. They have ball chairs, they have beanbag chairs, they have couches. So even just informal classrooms are starting to look like our homeschools. So feel free to make your classroom meet your students' needs. A big one for me, a benefit for all homeschoolers, not just kids with special needs, but was the multi-generational influence. I homeschooled when my mother was in a facility for Alzheimer's, and it allowed my kids to be with people who were aging, and we were there several times a week having lunch with her. And at one point, they would bring their school books, and we would interact with people, but we use things like saying, how many people can you make smile today? And they love doing that. And what a cool thing they learned how older people are really cool and have stories to tell. And so that was a really big benefit for our family. And I'm thinking of the solar eclipse coming up. I'm thinking, how are all these kids in classrooms and students going to experience a solar eclipse? There's not going to be anybody inside, I guess. They're all going to go out. I don't know. But I saw recently someone posted about their plans for the solar eclipse. They were going to have a picnic, and they had to move. So many people were going to join them. They had to move to a different area, and they were going to have sun chips and moon pies. And I thought, what a great opportunity for socialization, for science, for even some executive functioning in there as you're planning your picnic and putting everything together. So those are a few of the benefits. Has anybody else chimed in on?
Yes, we're getting a lot of comments.
Good.
Lots of thanks for doing this. Been looking forward to this as new to homeschooling. This is our first full year homeschooling. Thank you for all the information. And here's one person. I have 3 with fetal alcohol syndrome, and we went back to the basics, and it let us redo for mastery, and we schooled all year round and take multiple vacations. More benefits of homeschooling.
Yeah, that's for sure. Vacations. Traveling. That's a great one. Yeah. Thank you for those comments. So I'm going to go from here and talk about how you can facilitate learning in your homeschool for your individual children. But before I did that, I want to talk about one of the first families I worked with. So when I was homeschooling, there came a time when I needed to work part-time, and I wanted to. And this is kind of how this all came about. So this is almost 20 years ago. I did the math. And a family came to me, and they had a little girl who had so many sensory defensiveness and sensory difficulties going out to other environments. She just couldn't do it. She'd melt down. So they were home a lot. And what I discovered is, in going to their home, a couple things. Their daughters, their neurotypical daughters, were they were like paraprofessionals in the home. They came alongside their sister and their mom and did some of the schooling. They did some of the home programs that I suggested. And what I saw was that this little girl got better. She made progress. And I had some of my background had been in working with in formal schools, and I discovered that kids didn't make a lot of progress because we didn't have access to the parents. And a lot of what we did was around just the academics and just the classroom. So when I would give a home program, a lot of times it didn't get done because they had between 8 and 4 to get that in, and it just didn't make sense for them to try to do this big fancy home program that I'd written for them. So that's one thing I learned, is that therapy really worked when it was done, and when it was done regularly and by people who loved the student or the child. So some people may be wondering, what is occupational therapy? I don't help people get jobs directly, but for kids, their occupations are learning, developing independence, and play. So a lot of what we do is around those skills. And it could be helping a child with postural control. It could be fine motor. It could be handwriting. It could be helping them even with social skills and learning how to reciprocate play and take turns and those type of things. Those are frequently part of our groups. We also have speech therapy here, and we are privileged to have a speech therapist who goes beyond just the typical speech therapy and oral language. She has a lot of experience with dyslexia, and she works on things like word structure approaches and decoding, sound symbol correspondence. So she uses a process-oriented approach. So we are really looking forward to using her more for some of our kids with dyslexia. And what's cool about that is if you have insurance, we can bill speech therapy to insurance. And that doesn't always work out, but that is a benefit of having her around. So the first thing we do, of course, is assessment with kids and to find out where they are, and then we help you as a parent problem solve. But one thing I always tell homeschooling parents and families is that you need to observe your child. You need to be a student of your student. It takes time. You might want to journal. You might want to just go back and think about the summer. What are some things they really learned from? Did they learn from traveling? Did they learn from the people they were around? What really motivated them? Think about a time when they really captured what you were trying to teach them. What was it about that? Was it the environment? Was it the way you presented it? Was it auditory, visual? So make some notes about that, and if you can, even do it over a month or so and get some data for yourself so you know how your child learns. And if that doesn't, I know journaling takes time, otherwise just use your memory. Think of things in the past where they were the best learning times for your child. And I just recently purchased this book. One of my favorite authors and speakers is Carol Barnier. She's been to our conference a few times, and I tried to get her to come back next year, but she is not speaking right now, unfortunately. But her book, The Big What Now, is like a follow-up to when you have figured out a learning style. And there's a lot of other books out there. I don't mean to just plug Carol's book, but I loved it. I just started reading it, and I kind of skimmed through it. But one thing she says, that once you have a better understanding, that's when the work begins. Once you have an understanding of how your child learns, that's really just where it begins. That's the detective process. It's big. Learning all that's big, but what follows is bigger. What are you going to do? What's the big what now? Hence her title. And if you've read any of her other books, they're light and easy to read, and she's full of ideas. So okay, from there, once you kind of understand your child, what are you going to do with the environment? What are you going to do to modify curriculum? Somebody asked, one of the questions was, do I use, if my child's not at the level of my curriculum, do I just go to the age level or grade level, or do I go at their level of functioning? And I always say go to their level of functioning. You may have a child that's at a second grade level in math, but a fifth grade level in reading, or vice versa. Or they may be able to, they're starting to read, but they don't know how to use the scissors, or do some of those fine motor skills, or use utensils. Take time for those life skills. So go ahead and modify according to your child's needs. And as I talked previously about the benefits, take time to figure out a sensory diet. Make sure that your curriculum or your school day has breaks, or that you're alternating academics with something that's active or longer recess. If your child's doing online school, definitely break that up. Your child shouldn't be sitting for more than 20 minutes at a computer, and they need to look up. Use the 20-20-20 rule, which is 20 minutes on the screen and looking away for 20 feet away for 20 seconds. Even for your older kids who may be able to stay there longer than 20 minutes, at least give their eyes a break, because it's and make sure there's all kinds of ways to adapt so that the screen is at the right level and you're not doing this or having your child look like this. So those are some ways that you can modify your classroom. One thing I frequently say is don't bring the classroom home. I remember when I first started homeschooling, it's like, okay, I got to have a little classroom desk, and I have to have my books on the shelf and have a teacher's desk. And I quickly learned that didn't need to happen. Another really neat thing I observed at a conference, I don't know if anybody's heard of Joyce Herzog. She spoke a few years back, and she still has a website, and she has a couple books that she has written. One of them is called Luke's List, and it's full of life skills, and it as well as academic. It's like a scope and sequence. But when she was speaking at a conference several years back, she had a child come up to the stage, and she had her put her hands out. She started stacking up the books, and then she put the music instrument on top, and then she put the sports stuff on top, and pretty soon that child's about ready to fall over. Do you remember this? Okay. So I think her lesson, it really struck home with me, and again, that's that visual piece that really helped me to remember. But where was the heart? Where was the little girl's heart? It was gone. She was overwhelmed, and there was no more time for anything. So sometimes I tell families, go ahead and get that paper schedule out and fill in where you're going to do everything. And then you might realize there really isn't any time for additional activities. And one reason we homeschooled was so that our kids could do Awana and some of the other really neat extracurricular activities. So that was very important to us. But you have to make a plan for that. And if those are things and values that your family has, make sure it's in the schedule. Take a drink here. So you have your learning style figured out. You've got your alternative activities, and you're working all through. You got your curriculum picked out, but maybe the curriculum isn't quite right. And again, you have all the freedom in the world. You don't have to follow that curriculum exactly. I know when I was doing, sometimes I would say, do all the odd pages or do all the odd numbers. You can, if the curriculum is really busy, figure out a way to block parts of those pages that are too busy for some kids.
Sorry, Gina.
That's okay. Yeah.
We're getting a lot of questions about curriculum.
Okay.
Lots of people saying, do you have recommendations of curriculum to consider? What curriculum to use to teach a child to read with apraxia or phonological speech disorder that affects them sounding out words phonetically? I think there are some, again, resources. What are some resources I can look into for a child with mixed expressive receptive language disorder? Those kinds of things.
I think that comes down to, those are really good questions, by the way, and I'm not a curriculum specialist, I'll tell you that much, and there's so much out there, I don't know. I think it's a full-time job to really understand so much of the whole curriculum that's available to us as homeschooling families. But I kind of want to go back to just where is your child functioning? If there are receptive and expressive language deficits, what are they? Where are they? What's the level that they're functioning at? Are they 3-year-old, 4-year-old level? And then look at the curriculum according to that. Of course, I always want to plug the conference because that gives you an opportunity to really look at things and open up books. As far as, some curriculums are going to be more hands-on, like Sunlight I know has a variety. They recommend different kinds of manipulatives in some of their math programs. And, even if you think you've bought the wrong thing, that sometimes there's ways to adapt that. Do you want to read it to your child instead of just putting it in front of them? Do you want to do it alongside them? Take some of those sheets that, the worksheets, use highlighters, use your copier to make them bigger or smaller. So I'm kind of going toward the visual deficits, but if there's speech and language and reading deficits, I highly recommend testing. I'm glad you asked that, because it also reminds me of Homeschool Legal Defense Association has an awesome staff for struggling learners. And we've had, I think, 3 different people come and speak from there. And I've been on their website recently too, and even if you're not a member, there are resources there. They've listed ways to access funding for if you need money for special services or therapy or tutoring. They don't pay for it, but they will direct you to some other resources that you can check out, and there were more than I thought, so that's pretty cool. You can also use their consultants at no cost if you can get a hold of them. I'm sure they're busy right now, but they will guide you through some of that testing and curriculum, and there's also testing materials you can check out. I believe it's the Brigance, which is a developmental test, so you can find out where your child is functioning specifically, and that will also help you to write an IEP, which I'll talk about later if you are interested in doing that. So does that kind of answer that, Chelsea?
Yeah, a new question came in. Can you recommend a social skills workbook? The ones I found are geared more towards socializing in the classroom. They don't really fit with the outside, or they're not really for the outside world.
That's a good question. I find that with executive functioning books too. A lot of them are geared toward the classroom. Social thinking is where we get most of our materials for social skills. And the author is Michelle Garcia Winner, but I think the website's just socialthinking.com. It's full of curriculum, it's full of books that you can read on emotions and on social skills. If anybody has heard of the Superflex, they go through all the different superheroes in that curriculum and how they kids really relate to it. It's a really good program, so we use that. And as far, that's not typically a homeschool curriculum, but it's really tried and true. And we've had several people that are trained in that work here, and I've really grown to enjoy it and see its effectiveness. Another book by Michelle Garcia Winner is Zones of Regulation. I don't have it up here, and it's again a lot like I referred to that earlier, and that talks about self-regulation, which is one of our executive functions. So that's a really good book, but it's by the same author, Michelle Garcia Winner. So I know curriculum's always the question, but first you want to figure out how your child learns. So, and then you can kind of go from there. And like a Becca, for example, it's straight out workbook, and some kids learn that way, and I don't want to discount that. I didn't have one of those. We did use some of Becca, but I think homeschooling is not easy, and it's not for the lighthearted, and you're going to end up making lots of mistakes and going with it and praying through it. And I think in the end, you probably will still come out way far. Your kids will come out way better than if they were in a standard classroom, if you've already been directed to do it to homeschool. So kind of back to our modifications. I think we've talked about most of that. So I'm going to go on down to executive functioning because that was a big hit. A lot of people are interested in executive functioning. Before I do that, this kind of goes back to the environment, but I want to talk about another family that I worked with. This family came to me and said, we're all driving each other crazy. Some of us like music on, some of us like complete quiet, some of us like to fidget while we're working, some of us like the lights off, some of us talk to ourselves while we're learning. So, it was, some of it was easy to be the detective and figure out what they could do to accommodate each other. But I think the biggest thing was coming to an understanding where they all understood that they weren't trying to bug each other. It's just how they learn and how they were created. So that's even in our therapy, we do a lot of understanding, trying to understand kids. And it's amazing how the anxiety reduces when a child knows they're understood. You can even see it in their face when you say, oh, I know why that's hard for you. That you can't see those words very well, or you can't understand what I'm saying. Let me say it this way. I understand that it's really hard for you. And you can just see the anxiety reduce. And when the anxiety reduces, they're going to learn easier. So just wanted to throw that in. Some of you probably heard me talk about this, but there's 3 free things you can do that are always available to you. One is humor. So go and check out those joke books at the library. They're ridiculous, some of them, but have your kids write jokes and tell them to their siblings. It lightens up sometimes those stressful days. Nature is always free. Go outside. Or bring nature in. There's many ways to do that. Sensory tubs, bringing leaves and insects and all those things that you can study. It's free. Music is always free. Well, not always, but you can get music with, especially now with all the different online websites and Pandora, and just don't forget about those things because they can really change up your day. Humor, nature, and music. Another way to really lighten and change a homeschool day is to play games. There are so many out there, and you can even, one thing Carol Barnier does in some of her other books is she adapts games and uses them to teach different concepts or things like sight words or that type of thing. I had a friend who she made a test into a treasure hunt in their house. So her daughter had to go find the answers and then bring them back to her. That was pretty fun. So for those kids who are kinesthetic, they need those games and movement. That's the other free thing is movement. All right, so I'm going to go down to executive functions. The goal is to establish an environment and culture that facilitates executive functioning. And kind of by now, if you've done some of these things, you've already targeted some of the skills. And I've listed them. I don't know if you can see them, but organization, planning and prioritizing, praxis or motor planning, self-regulation, which is impulse control and emotional control, self-monitoring, sustaining effort, taking initiative, time management, being adaptable and flexible, and working memory. So there's a lot of words, and most of them you're familiar with. I did a whole talk a few years ago on executive functioning, used a lot of different resources. One of my favorites, though, is understood.org, and if you go there, there's a lot on executive functioning. But a couple of words in here that people are not real familiar with, praxis or motor planning, is something we do in occupational therapy a lot. Some of our kiddos just have a lot of difficulty with coordination or the ability to navigate through their environment or organize themselves with their materials. They're just clumsy in some ways, so for various reasons. So praxis or motor planning is an executive function. Working memory is another one that you've probably heard, and I've seen this described as the mental sticky note. So it's can be both spatial memory and auditory memory, and it could be working memory is used like when you give a child multi-step instructions. So it's the information that's given to be used right away. It might be a math formula. It might be, again, multi-steps for a craft or something they're putting together. Are they able to remember that? So you might write it down, and then a few minutes later they forget it, or they don't remember what you said if it was auditory. So it's different than short-term memory and long-term memory. It's working memory. It's what you need to use the information and put it to use right away. Okay. I want to tell you about one more family. This family came to me. They had gone to a course on sensory processing and were convinced, and rightly so, that their child had sensory processing disorder. And he was literally bouncing off the walls. He needed lots of movement. He was a kinesthetic learner, had a lot of behavioral difficulties. And they were very frustrated. He was frustrated. So, and they had decided to homeschool because that's about all they could do at that point. And through giving them ideas for equipment at home, kind of structuring his day a little bit with leeway, and allowing lots of breaks, he started to do really well. They also did some things with diet, but their goal was not to homeschool him forever, and he was able to transition into kindergarten last year and was successful. So I love hearing those stories, and again, it was a lot about the family understanding what he needed, and he wasn't unintelligent. He was actually very sharp and smart, but we just need to figure out how he learned and how to approach his behavior. I have a really good friend who's a speech therapist who would tell me that behavior is communication. If a child is melting down, the first thing to look at are some of the physical things, and what are they trying to tell us? What are their bodies trying to tell us? And there may still be a defiance there, but we're only going to make things worse if we don't have an understanding of why they're doing what they're doing. So I guess one more thing, anybody who knows me knows I've talk about screen time. And when we do evaluations, one of the first things we ask is how much screen time is a child getting. And as you know, that includes phones, tablets, computer, any video games, movies. So it's important to add that together. How many hours is it? And if you're doing online curriculum, their leisure skills should not be in front of a screen. That's way over the top. So that said, figure out some hobbies, get outside. So I'm not saying that technology is evil in itself. Here we are in front of the screen. But it's balancing it and making sure, especially your kids who need to move, have that opportunity. I'm going to read one more quote because I don't want to forget this. I really like it. One of my favorite authors, Athena Odin, she wrote Ready Bodies, Ready Minds. And she says that the energy we spend constructing a world of objects, shapes, dimensions is enormous. Without the incredible and finely tuned machine called our body, our brain would be at loss to describe the world. Our ability to see, touch, feel, hear, move, and control ourselves in relation to the environment is the slate that academic learning is etched on. So I just really love that quote. Maybe I'll put it on our Facebook because I Forgot how much I like it. So there, any other questions?
Yes,
Shanti?
we have had a ton of questions. Thank you everyone for all your input. This has been tremendously wonderful. Just all the feedback I'm getting from you
Yay.
guys. I'd like to start with the questions that were submitted in advance, and if we have time, we'll get to your questions. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. Question number 1, I'd love to know if there are any special legal requirements or tips. I've heard some suggest creating an IEP even if you homeschool. Thoughts on this?
Okay, that's yeah, and I forgot to address that. HSLDA recommends an IEP. It's not required. And I think it's a great idea. It can be as simple as 3 or 4 goals and then followed by short-term goals. Another, in my 20 years of following homeschooling and special needs, I've heard people say, don't forget things like character development, spiritual development, besides your reading, math, and your subjects. Be sure to put goals in those areas, and maybe some of your school years are really more focused on that character development and social skills and spiritual development. You can use your scope and sequence in some of your curriculum to develop goals. You can use your therapists or other tutors to help you write the goals that are kind of in line with what their work is. So that can all be included in an IEP. The first part of an IEP is simply is a kind of an executive function for the teacher. You are going to put down everything about your child, the specialists that are in their lives, the curriculum you're using, followed by their current level of functioning. So that's where your testing data would go in. And then from there, you'd put your goals and your short-term goals. So, we've talked about doing workshops on that, and we can do that again. That might be a topic we approach next year for the conference. So there's a lot of information out there about IEPs, but it's not required. So.
Thanks, Jean.
Sure.
The next question, are there any programs that provide assistance for assistive technology for our kids? We use Bookshare, but wondering if there is anything to help with other technology.
I am not real well versed on that. I think going again to HSLDA and possibly a lot of speech therapists have more knowledge in that area, and I know there's some specialists in town that I don't have their information right in front of me, but we've worked with a visually impaired child that homeschools, and that mom was an incredible resource. So she's always willing to share things, and I think that's where you kind of moms talking to other moms are really valuable. Yeah.
I agree.
Sorry, I can't help you much on that one.
Here's a third question. I'm not sure how to phrase this. I'm homeschooling 3 children, 14, 12, and 7. We also have guardianship of a 2-year-old niece. We don't have money for testing, but we suspect the 12-year-old and 2-year-old are very low on the autism spectrum. Not severe enough to cause major problems, but apparent enough that things get frustrating quite often. What I'm asking is, are there any tips for my 12-year-old while schooling him, or thoughts on how to deal with my niece while I'm trying to school the other children?
That's a lot in there. I think homeschoolers are really good at delegating and using the children of various ages to teach the others. And I wouldn't think of that as putting your child to work, but rather practicing some of those executive functioning skills when they're helping the 2-year-old or helping some of the other younger children. I've seen, again, that 12-year-old, even though they can help you, again, you want to find out where they're functioning, where their level is, so you're not frustrating them too much. So that would be if you have insurance for them, getting some testing done, I would recommend too. So.
And fourth question, my son has dyslexia, and I've heard of different therapy that can help wake up the brain and stimulate some areas of the brain. I would love any strategies we can do at home, as well as advice on ADD and executive function for kids with dyslexia.
Okay. Dyslexia is a big term. There's a lot of different kinds of dyslexia, as you probably know. So I know I sound like a broken record, but you want to get some testing done so your curriculum is matching their needs. And waking up the brain. It kind of depends on their sensory needs. Do they need to touch things? Do they need to move? Are they best in the morning or in the evening? So I would, again, be a student of your child and figure out what makes them tick. So I know that's not specific, but you kind of need a little more information about where their specific disability or difficulties are. So,
thank you so much, Jean. There have been a few new questions.
Okay,
too.
yeah.
How do you suggest helping a child with an expressive language delay?
Patience. Use sign language is a good way to facilitate expressive language. And I don't know how old this child is, but using movement and hands-on activities, and of course, if there's a delay and you're worried about them really developing, you go to a speech therapist. And I'm talking a lot about therapies. Of course, PossAbilities, we provide therapy. You can also access therapy in your school, and HSLDA doesn't always recommend that, partly because their members you can't be a member of HSLDA and enrolled in a school, and you have to be enrolled in a school to be able to access those therapies. So if that's an important value to you to be an HSLDA member, then it kind of kicks you out. Now I think I need to verify that. Some of you all might have newer information for me, but I think that's still the case, that you can't be a member if you're accessing the school for anything, your school system.
This question is based on what you said earlier about diet changes. What type of diet changes are suggested?
Oh my goodness, that is a huge topic. And I don't recommend anything specific. So I would, again, you need to find out medically what the issues are. A lot of our clients have used KU integrative medicine because they do all the testing and still recommend some of the alternative diets, but you get a little more lab work, a little more information. So there's lots of opportunities in the city for that functional medicine. For a lot of chiropractors are doing that, the testing. So we try to keep a list of those resources. And that kind of goes back to, for years we have developed a resource list for homeschooling and special needs. It came from that first family I met 20 years ago. That was her goal, and we together started that list, and we just kind of sent it back and forth. We've sent it to the Missouri organization, they added theirs. So it's morphed, and that was it was internet, but not the kind that you have now. So we updated it, I think, maybe 3 years ago. And we try to keep the local resources updated. So now with Google, you don't need quite that many resources, or you don't need the printed page, but it's available. I can email it to anyone. So.
Well, thank you again, everyone. This is just one last question, and then we do need to move on to the special limited time offer that Jean has waiting for us at the end of the Q&A. But one last question: suggestions for free or reasonably priced curriculum for a 7th grader with an LD in math and reading and who is moderately dyslexic.
Moderately priced. Again, find out where his level is. And I don't know why I want to say the library, because that's the most moderately priced used you can be. Homeschool Hookup, you guys, and you're selling curriculum, and there's 2 other groups under Homeschool Hookup, the Exceptional Families, or I think that's what's called, Exceptional Families, and also the homeschoolers in the dyslexic group. They are awesome at selling and sharing information on curriculum. So I think just keep asking questions online and on Homeschool Hookup. and if you've just pulled them out of school, and I did this, I pulled my daughter out in 2nd grade right after spring break, and we did bring her curriculum home from the public school and used some of that. But I also, part of it, she relaxed, she got healthy, and was able to start reading like that next summer. We use the library a lot, and now she loves reading. So, yeah. I know it's not very specific.
Well, thank you. All great questions. And,
yes, great questions. So we're going to should we pull 4 names? You put a lot of names in there.
I did, yes.
So we'll pull 4 names out of our basket.
Drawing.
And you can email us. Is that what we decided? And then choose between 10% off for the group registrations or a book. Walks on the Wild Side. Okay? All right.
Yes.
We'll mix them up a little bit because I know some of the other ones the first ones are down the bottom. Okay, we have Jennifer Hubbs.
Jennifer Hubbs.
Congratulations. Shell Wilkinson. Prairie Cat. You know who you are. And Camille Drapeau Stewart. Camille.
Oh, yay.
Okay. So I'll read them again. Jennifer Hubbs, Shell Wilkinson, Prairie Cat, and Camille Drapeau Stewart. All right. Any other questions, Shansi? We have a little bit of time.
Okay, sure. Let me just finish posting a comment to Facebook. I will say congrats to our winners. Please email social media at midwesthomeschoolers.org and we will get that going for you.
You're so fast.
I don't feel fast. My fingers are always typing much slower than my brain. Okay.
I also invite anybody, before we have people start therapy at PossAbilities, we frequently offer just an initial visit to come and see the place and meet us. And it's just 20 minutes. We don't charge for that time. So and you can see my stack of books if you want to. That's just some of them. But there's, Peggy Kay is another one of my favorite authors, and Christine Field. So I love talking to homeschool families. I really do. And sometimes it's just one little hint that can make a difference. So call us and we'd love to meet you.
Yes, and I'd just like to point out a few people who have been commenting. There's lots of great information just in the comments. Most libraries have a sensory and fine motor closet. You can check those items out. And then
Good
there was,
idea.
I think, Missouri Assistive Technology. Here are some extra questions. Do you offer TheraPlay and or attachment therapy besides learning delay and sensory related therapies?
That would be a play therapist. We do not have play therapists per se. There are some really good ones in town, but we do not have play therapists. We play a lot.
And then here's another question. Are these info classes always via webinar or are there any in person?
Glad you asked. A psychologist friend of mine, we are planning a workshop in October, and it will be mostly on executive functioning, and we don't have specifics yet, but if you want to email us or ask on Facebook, I'll keep that posted. We're also planning to start a parent support group, and that's not just for homeschoolers, it's for some of her patients and our clients. And a lot of her clients have attention issues, autism, sensory processing disorder. So she's wonderful, and I'm really excited to be partnering with her on that. I think mental health is an issue that we sometimes ignore, and I really like her approach. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that is all for now. Oh. Just a new question. Any other IEP resources other than HSLDA for Kansas?
There are some books and manuals, and I don't I can't recall them specifically, but they're on our resource list. So if you want to email me, I'll just send you the whole resource list. So there'll be IEP resources on there.
Excellent. And here's another great tip. Mid-American Nazarene University has a great play therapy.
Yes.
We've used it. Hope that helps. Very reasonably priced too.
Yes, their play therapy is good. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. My child is 5 years old. That was for the question about helping a child with an expressive language delay.
Okay. Yeah. We talked about that.
Okay. Excellent. Well, that is all for now. Any last final questions before we end?
Come meet us.
Thank you all very much for your participation. It's always great hearing from all of you. Oh, where do we email you? You can always email social media at midwesthomeschoolers.org, and then we'll forward anything to Jean. That's
Yep.
Any other ways. PossAbilities has its own Facebook page. You can check them out there.
Like us, please.
And yes, thank you all. I'm great. Thank you all for your tips, Jean.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
Good information. Thank you for your time.
Sure.
And yeah, if there's anything else, we'll be posting this to our Facebook page, so it will be living on forever in the recording. And if we didn't get around to your question yet, you can check back and we can reply to everyone's comments as we have more time. And about the homeschool conference, I saw several people asking about that. It's basically every year in the spring, MPE has a homeschool conference. The last few years has been at the KCI Expo Center, and it's just chock full of information, tips. There's a vendor hall filled with curriculum vendors and other vendors who sign up, and so it's just a great way, as Jean was saying, to browse curriculum and test things out before you actually commit to purchasing.
There's a lot of workshops, and we haven't invited, although I tried inviting Carol Barnier, but we will have struggling learners workshops again, and I'm not sure yet who those people are. God knows.
We'll find out. We'll find out. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you,
all right.
Jean.
Thank you. Thanks, Shansi.